So this is Mathare. I don't know if any of you have been there before. Mathare has about, according to the census, has 100,000 people. If you look at Google Maps, you wouldn't know that. If you turn on the satellite image, you see the image is much different, right? Everybody knows about Kibera, sub-Saharan biggest slum, they say, of about 300,000 people. But again, Google Maps doesn't really show you that picture. If you look at the satellite imagery, then it's a different story. So not only geographical information, but statistical information is often missing, right? So I don't know if you've been following, but they said Kibera has 1 million people, and some people said 2 million people, and people were saying, oh no, that's too much, and then they did the census, and they said Kibera has 170,000 people, and everybody was up at arms saying, oh, that's not enough, Kibera has more. So I see data in informal settlements, it's a complicated issue, right? This is Mathare, and what you see here is a fire and people going through their belongings, trying to find whatever is not ruined. So we were tasked to research historical occurrences of fires in some informal settlements, and we went to all of the, official data sets, so-called official data sets, like the Nairobi Fire Department, National Archives, the Daily Nation, the nation's biggest media house, and we found 7 fires reported in the area of interest in 5 years in the time period that we were interested in. The Red Cross, who hired us to do this research, has an army of people on the ground who are reporting on various incidences, including fires. They reported on more than 100 fires in the same area of interest, same time period. So we learned that you cannot rely on the outsiders to tell you what's going on in these communities. And if you don't know what's going on, how are you going to make appropriate decisions, right? So we at Spatial Collective, we teach people and organizations how to adopt available technologies, to use them to collect data that is important for them, and then we help them use that data, analyze the data, own that data, and also help them make the most appropriate development decisions. So how we do this, let's look at trash. So this is a situation in Mathare again. There's a lot of trash, but what is interesting about this is there is 40, 50 groups dealing with waste management. So why is the situation still like that? So first of all, you have to identify, who are the main stakeholders. So this is Kaka. He's a youth group leader whose youth group also does waste management. And he's not alone. There's about, like I said, dozens and dozens of groups who are doing the same thing. So this, you see a meeting where we present, wow, what we're gonna do and for what purpose and what we're trying to understand. And then the first thing we did was we had to document what is the scope of the problem. So you see here Thuo collecting geolocation on, this is a broken sewage line. So anything that is related to waste management, we documented it. Secondly, we needed to understand what the stakeholders, who the stakeholders are and how they're connected. So we did something called network mapping to see the formal, informal stakeholders, what are their relationships, et cetera, et cetera. The third thing we did was we randomly selected 1,000 households. And you see Wambua there conducting an interview on a mobile phone where we asked about 55 questions related to waste management and technology and so on and so forth. And what we found is that slums, for example, they're not homogenic, right? They're different. The same way as Nairobi is much different, different areas are different. In the slum is the same thing, different areas of the slums are a bit different. So introducing policy which just cross-sects through the slum might not work, And then, we brought all of this. So each representative here you see is a representative of the group, and in the middle is a county of Nairobi representative, and they're exchanging information and plans, and the youth are presenting the data. And basically what we found that the solution is very simple. All they need is a truck with a schedule, right? And you're gonna say, oh, but that's so logical, right? And it is. So the solution does not have to be complicated. It just has to be the right solution and it has to work. Now, in this case, all of these youth groups were working separately. They didn't share information, they didn't collaborate. So what the truck represented for them was a focal point, something that they could all focus on, right? Another issue I'll quickly present is crime. So this is a different problem, you know, because crime is complicated, even in the slums, you know, like you see there community members arresting a certain person. That's in Kibera. You see somewhere in Eastlands, a youth group, you know, has a machete behind the door, you know, so they obviously don't feel safe. This man here is called the General, so his youth group receives money from the community to patrol the whole night, walking around, making sure everybody is safe. So you see the issue of crime it's different. It's not the same as maybe where you're coming from. And this is what we try to understand. So we did a project in Kayole, which is another big informal settlement close to the airport, and we didn't have anything to work with. So first, we divided into 10 zones, the way that people identify themselves with. Then we set up a digitization project in a different slum where we trained 10 young people how to digitize, and they digitized all the buildings for us so we could create like a building layer. Then in Kayole, we trained about 20 people on how to do GPS data collection, and they collected hundreds of points, all related somehow to security, like police station, chief scams, what else? Security lights, bars, all sorts of things that they associated with security and safety. And basically, we created this base map in 5 days, right? Like thousands of different structures with hundreds of different points. But they still didn't tell us much about crime in Soweto. So we worked with crime experts, gender-based violence experts, to do like a qualitative questionnaire, which we then worked with various demographics, from young women to elderly women, from young men, reformed men, and so on and so forth. We use methods like participatory mapping and all sorts of other stuff, and so these are some of the outputs that we created. So just quickly, on the left you see mobility, so you see like if it's red, it means the person works and lives in the slum. If it's blue, it means that they move out of the slum for work. So we saw that, for example, 40% of men interviewed left the while only 20% of women. But those circles are really interesting. For example, each line there represents a path walked between two locations in the slum. If the line is blue, it means that the people feel safe. If it's red, it means that they feel unsafe. So you can see above is men, below is women. So women feel much more unsafe walking around the slum than men. Then we said, okay, so it's very abstract, but let's go down to the neighborhood level, and we were able to identify through our methods different streets, and why people feel safe here or don't feel safe there. Then we'd look at different types of crime that occur and the support systems, so we could see, what kind of support systems do people have available or what kind of support system they don't. And then in the end, we said, okay, now we want to see what are your proposed improvements. So we can see again down to a neighborhood level, very detailed, like we need speed bumps on this road, we need more security lights here, and more general than that circle there. Basically, the number one thing that people needed was a rehabilitation center because the area is known for a lot of drug abuse. You can use the same methods on a much larger scale. So this is Lamu, the whole county, and we were tasked to see how the potential construction of the port that the Kenya wants to build is going to affect the livelihoods of local people. Now, there was a lot of issues with this. First of all, who are the local people? There's no data set. You can just walk and say, I want to see who the local people, hello, and what they're doing, right? There's no data set like that. So we had to analyze a lot of secondary data sources. We tried to map all of those things including different ethnicities, different livelihoods, etc., etc. And then we superimposed the port on top of it so we could see what some of the potential conflicts might be. And within a couple of months, we came from this to this. So there's hundreds of data points, each one of them pointing to just one thing, the potential conflict between Lapset and the local communities in Lamo. Then this data was turned into much nicer maps which were being used then, so sort of like in a roundtable discussion between the government officials and the community members to address very specific issues, like what's going to happen to that coral reef where we collect those shells, or what's going to happen to this or that, or what about the catchment areas where the pastoralists go with their cattle. So like I said, from a small area like Korogocho, where we use the same methods to monitor crime in different time periods, to working with fishermen, trying to see which are their fishing routes, fish landing sites, where do they collect certain goods from the sea, to looking at how the slums in Nairobi are prepared for fires, how they're prepared to tackle fires, to like the latest project on property rights. So you see here Fred from Taita Hills, he's testing out different technologies like available tools, and then we're comparing them to the professional grade surveying equipment, and we're working with surveyors and lawyers and all of this, local experts, but also professionals to see whether we can scale up documentation of land in this country, right? And this is an image from Tana River where we then implemented some of these methods to create the first community maps in Kenya for protection and so on and so forth.